Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going straight into a major story, the Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking trial. We're really focusing on the initial testimony of Cassie Ventura.
Exactly, his former girlfriend.
Yeah.
And we've been looking at, well, excerpts from the CBS News YouTube transcript, specifically covering that first day she was on the stand.
Right.
And just to be clear, our aim here isn't, legal interpretation or guessing the outcome.
No.
It's really about digging into the key details from her account so far.
Yeah.
What did she actually say? And maybe understanding the defense's opening strategy, see if we can get an early sense of the dynamics in this very complex case.
Okay, so starting right off, even just the scene in the courtroom seemed, well, significant. Ventura's arrival.
Yeah.
She was wearing a tight brown dress, and it apparently highlighted her pregnancy very visibly.
And what's interesting there, or maybe revealing, is the defense's reaction. Reports suggest they'd hoped she wouldn't appear quite like that.
Really?
Well, the concern, you can imagine, was the potential jury impact. Seeing Ventura visibly pregnant, they might have felt it could create, maybe subconsciously, some sympathy towards her.
Ah, okay. That makes sense. But it seems the judge didn't buy that.
Apparently not. The reporting suggests the defense kind of lost that battle, and she appeared as she was. It's a small thing, maybe, but it shows you the level of scrutiny on every single detail here.
Definitely. So with that kind of visual set, let's get into how this relationship reportedly started.
Okay, yeah. The timeline she laid out seems pretty important. She testified she met Combs when she was 19?
Just 19.
Yeah, and their first kiss, according to her testimony, didn't happen until around her 21st birthday.
Okay.
So it feels like the prosecution is starting there to, build this picture of how things developed over time.
And a key part of that development, from what we understand, is the prosecution trying to show a pattern of control that Combs allegedly had over her life. And this seems to have included her career, too.
Precisely. Ventura had this 10-record deal with his company, Bad Boy Records.
Right, 10 records.
But she testified only one album ever actually got released.
Just one.
Yeah. And if you connect those dots, the prosecution might be arguing that this lack of professional output, well, it helped make her financially dependent on Combs.
Right. It raises questions about the power dynamic right from, well, fairly early on.
Which leads us straight into the money aspect.
Yeah.
The testimony suggests Combs did have significant control over her finances, allegedly provided her apartments, things like that. It paints an initial picture, certainly, of a considerable imbalance there.
A power imbalance, definitely.
Absolutely. And this alleged financial control could be, well, a really crucial piece for the prosecution, potentially backing up the argument that her autonomy was, compromised.
But the testimony didn't just stop at money, did it? It went to some very serious and, frankly, disturbing allegations of abuse.
It did. She testified about a general pattern of abusiveness in the relationship, and then got into specific sexual behaviors she claims Combs introduced her to.
Including things like voyeurism and,
Yeah.
what was the term used? Freak-offs.
That's the term reported, yes.
Yeah.
Freak-offs. And the description is pretty stark.
How so?
According to the testimony, these allegedly involve Ventura, or sometimes Combs too, engaging in sex acts with male escorts. And not just briefly, but for extended periods. Hours, sometimes even days.
Wow. Hours or days.
Yeah. Those kinds of details are clearly meant to be impactful. And they seem to directly tie into the sex trafficking charges themselves. What do you make of putting those specific details out there so early?
Well, it certainly paints a picture of a very unusual and potentially coercive situation. You can definitely see why the prosecution would highlight that. And it wasn't just the sexual allegations. She also talked about the instability, her fear of physical violence. There was that detail about being afraid of getting hit in the face just for making the wrong face. That's particularly chilling. It really suggests an atmosphere of intense control, intimidation.
Yeah, those specific kind of visceral details. They can be incredibly powerful for conveying the alleged environment, They definitely feed into the prosecution's bigger argument about racketeering.
Explain that a bit more, the racketeering angle.
Well, they're essentially arguing that Combs Company wasn't just a regular business, that it operated like a criminal enterprise.
Okay. And how does Ventura's testimony support that?
She testified, according to reports, that Combs' own security guards, even trusted assistants, were involved in monitoring her, tracking her down if he couldn't reach her himself.
So using his business resources, his staff, to control her personally.
Exactly. That alleged use of his network, his organization, for control, that's a crucial element if you're trying to prove racketeering charges.
Got it. Now let's flip to the other side for a moment. How is the defense handling all this as it comes out?
Right. It's important to look at their strategy, too, even this early.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because they're not just denying everything outright.
Oh.
No, that's quite significant. In their opening statements, the defense lawyers actually acknowledged that Sean Combs has flaws.
Huh?
They admitted to domestic violence instances, assault, what they termed a bad temper.
So they're admitting some wrongdoing.
Yes, but, and this is the key part, their main argument is that these things they do admit to. They don't equate to the specific charges he's facing now, the sex trafficking charges.
Okay, so it's a strategy of, yes, he did bad things in the past, but these charges are different and wrong.
That seems to be the core of it. Acknowledge some past misconduct, but draw a very firm line about the current accusations.
The reporting also mentioned something about Combs' own behavior in the courtroom.
Yeah, just an observation, but noted nonetheless. That Combs was seen watching Ventura testify and then looking over at the jury, sort of gauging their reactions.
Try and read the room, maybe,
Yeah.
or connect.
Potentially. It suggests, an awareness of the impact her words are having, maybe an attempt to understand how the jury is taking it all in, or perhaps even project something himself.
Yeah.
It speaks to that performative element you always get in a trial.
Definitely. Every look, every gesture gets analyzed.
Hmm.
So as we kind of wrap up this first look, it's crucial to remember this is just the beginning, right? Her testimony paused for lunch.
Right. She's expected to be on the stand for several more days. This initial testimony, powerful as it is just the opening chapter of what's likely going to be a very long and complicated trial.
Indeed. So just to quickly recap the key takeaways from this first slice of testimony, we heard about a relationship starting with a significant age gap, allegations that it developed into one with major financial and personal control exerted by Combs.
Right. The record deal, the apartments.
Then the introduction to specific and potentially exploitative sexual practices, these freak-offs.
Yeah, and the voyeurism claims.
Plus underlying accusations of violence in a climate of fear. And the prosecution is weaving this all together to support that racketeering claim, that idea of a criminal enterprise.
While the defense, on the other hand, is conceding past faults, domestic violence, assault, but strongly pushing back against the current sex trafficking charges.
Okay, which leads us to the final thought we wanted to leave you with. Hearing this initial, and let's be honest, very difficult testimony, what do you think are shaping up to be the biggest hurdles for both the prosecution and the defense as this trial goes on?
Yeah, what challenges lie ahead for each side based on just this opening?
And maybe what other parts of this whole incredibly complex situation do you think might start to emerge in the coming days, the coming weeks, as more testimony comes out? Clearly, there are still many layers to peel back here.